There is something very wrong in the head with Americans, specifically Republicans in Washington, Congress, who are in charge of their state areas, who just, I don't know what it is. Is it greed? Is it just sheer carelessness, lack of empathy, lack of compassion, corruption? Is it a mixture of all of those things put together? Because there is nothing like it in the rest of the world compared to what you have in America, in the United States, with regards to the amount of guns they have in their country. Always, pretty much everyone in the whole United States owns a firearm. That's already a horrendous statistic, and there are around 30,000-ish crimes related to gun violence every year in America. 30,000. That is off the charts. I mean, you don't get anything, like, even in the UK, it's infinitesimally small. It's tiny. In Europe, in other countries, in Norway, in Sweden, in Denmark, Japan has a like a 0.0 decimal of gun violence and the people that die compared to in America, where it's just completely off the charts. What is going on in America where they just let this continuously let this happen, almost on a daily basis? Children are mown down in schools where they are being educated, where they think that they are safe, but, you know, children as young as 18 are allowed to go into a shop, and even if there's something mentally wrong with them, if they're a little bit unstable, they can still have like minimal background checks and be able to buy an AR, assault weapon used in the fields of war. It's a weapon of war that, you know, you see members of the army use. People in the army who, you know, go out to the Middle East, woe betide them, who use assault weapons, who are capable of causing the most amount of damage in the least amount of time. These politicians are sick people. They are the most disgusting, the lowest of the low in humanity. Because in America, bribery is legal. The NRA, the National Rifle Association, who you may have heard of, has such a stranglehold of power and influence over these politicians, most of whom are Republican. And just the amount of power and just it's unfathomable how much the level of influence they have over these politicians who don't work for the people of the country, the people in their states. They don't. It's not about looking after the people in their states and their country. It's about who can make the most money and work for the biggest corporations who have the most money. And they'll work for them instead of the people who really need looking after. It's not about reform, it's not about progress, it's just about meaningless, corrupt, disgusting greed. They just gorge on it. They're like animals. It is foul. I've got an article from the Wall Street Journal about the group of students who survived the Florida Parkland shooting, the one that happened last week. 17 students and teachers were shot down by a former student. I'm not going to say his name, but just when is it going to end? It as far as I'm concerned, this is not going to end. It's going to keep going until the NRA and the politicians who work for the NRA are stopped and prevented from receiving donations, prevented from receiving blood money, because that's what it is. They've got blood on their hands. It's just they're drenched in the blood of gun victims, and it just is it's awful. It's disgusting. It's sickening. I can't get my head around it. Someone coming from a country where gun violence is minimal. It's not even like a crime that police have to deal with very often, because our gun restrictions prevent many people from buying guns freely, and you have to have very strict licenses to buy guns, and even then it's nowhere near as violent as AR-15s and assault weapons. It's more like rifles for shooting deer. So here's the Wall Street Journal article who was describing the students who travelled to Tallahassee, Florida, the state legislature. High school students who survived Florida's deadly school shooting last week descended on the state capitol Wednesday to plead for stricter gun control measures, raising pressure on lawmakers in the normally firearm-friendly state to pass legislation. 90% of my fellow Americans support background checks, yet you lawmakers have failed to act, said Florence Yared, a 17-year-old student at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, where a gunman killed 17 people. Some of you said it was too soon to talk about gun control. No, it is not too soon. The Florida House voted Tuesday against debating a measure to ban outright semi-automatic weapons, something student activists are pushing. So, a semi-automatic weapon was used last week by the shooter in Florida at the school to mercilessly kill some children. That was the weapon that was used, and on Tuesday the Florida state legislature refused to even debate, even get close to talking about restricting or banning semi-automatic rifles. They won't even talk about it. They don't even want to get close to the subject. How cowardly, how small of a person must you be to be so frightened of, be so under the thumb of a massive corporation that you won't even go near talking about it because you don't want any gun restrictions whatsoever. And even when you try and make another excuse for it, say, it wasn't nothing to do with guns, it was to do with mental health, and the person had a mental health issue, and that's why he went into the school, so we need to look more into mental health. However, you can no longer use that argument, seeing as your own president last year signed a executive order that rolled back an Obama-era piece of legislation that prevented mentally ill people from buying guns. And yet you allowed that to happen, so therefore you are all for it. You want more people to buy guns. You want more guns in the hands of people who can't even manage their own finances. That is disgusting. That is so irresponsible. What is wrong with America? What is wrong? There was a listening session in the White House which Donald Trump hosted for the victims or the survivors of the shooting last week, and just to listen to what the people had to say about gun control, what should be done, etc. And instead of wanting to discuss gun control, restrictions, God forbid we should talk about gun restrictions. Second Amendment, everyone should have their right to bear arms. Instead of talking about gun restrictions, he talked about stepping actually stepping up the amount of guns in schools and giving teachers possession of guns to protect students. And they should be given special training, concealed carry. They should be allowed to take guns into school. Teachers should be trained to use weapons in case this ever happens. No, 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 no. That is the worst thing you could do, apart from doing nothing. That is the very worst thing you could do. The argument the NRA makes about, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That is such bollocks. I mean, please, you must understand this. This is just insane lunacy. That more guns equals more gun violence equals more dead children. That is it. You please understand that, because the more guns you have, the more gun violence there is. If you give people more access to guns and weapons, the more likely it is for this to keep going on. It's common sense. It's very, very simple. And yet, you Republicans, you people in Congress, they just can't accept it. They don't want to go near it. They just couldn't care less about your children, your dead children who have not even been buried yet. Couldn't care less, couldn't give a fuck. As long as the donations keep going into my pocket, I could not give a flying fuck about your kids. Because I want more guns. Because more guns means more money for the NRA, more bump stocks. Let's have more of it, because every time a massacre happens, every time a mass shooting happens, there is panic buying of guns the next day. The NRA receives bigger profits. It is fucking vile. And by the way, guns are not God's gift to America. This has nothing to do with God. It's nothing to do with Jesus. Right-wingers and the NRA just use God and Christianity and evangelist Christians as an excuse. It's something for them to hide behind, to push their agenda of more guns, more weapons. They don't care. They don't care. And they hide behind this wall of Christianity. God gave me my weapon. God is, given me my right to bear arms, and we must preserve the Second Amendment. Jesus Christ. Fuck off with that. Fuck off, because God doesn't exist. God isn't telling you these things, and even if he was, he can't do anything about it. There's something very, very wrong in America. And you need to do something. I don't know if anything will ever get done about this, but wow. You've got problems in America. Big, big problem. I thought the UK had problems, but this is on a different scale altogether.